Snubbed and slammed. That's what happened to U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton in Turkey, where he did meet with senior officials, but not with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who also hit Bolton with a harsh public rebuke. At issue between them is the fate of Kurdish militias in Syria, who have fought alongside U.S. troops against ISIS, now risk being abandoned by Washington and then attacked by Turkey. Bolton spoke on Sunday in Jerusalem about seeking assurances from Turkey on the Kurds as the U.S. forces pull out from Syria. But here's Erdogan's response today in Ankara.
It is not for us to accept and stomach the message U.S. National Advisor John Bolton gave from Israel. Regarding this matter, Bolton has made a serious mistake, and whoever thinks like this has also made a mistake. It is not possible for us to make compromises on this point. Those who are part of the terror corridor in Syria will receive the necessary lesson. There is no single difference between the PKK, YPG, PYD, and ISIS.
Now, Erdogan's blunt message to the U.S. there was at apparent odds with the Syria policy he announced yesterday in a New York Times opinion piece, writing, Turkey intends to cooperate and coordinate our actions with our friends and allies. We are the sole stakeholder that can work simultaneously with the United States and Russia. We will build on those partnerships to get the job done in Syria. Well, for more, we're going to be joined from Washington by our senior diplomatic correspondent, Nina Larsen. But first, let's go to Istanbul and TRT World anchor Ali Mustafa. And Ali, certainly differences on the Kurds between the U.S. and Turkey, but why that harsh, even personal tone against John Bolton from President Erdogan?
Well, because as far as the Turks are concerned, the Americans have lost it. On the one hand, they say that they will pull out of Syria, they will stop supporting the YPG. On the other hand, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor of the U.S., before his trip to Turkey, says that Turkey must give guarantees and assurances to protect the YPG PKK. This, as Erdogan says, is unacceptable. Turkey, Ankara says, has been making all the right noises. In that New York Times article that you mentioned, supporting, in effect, what Trump has been saying, that yes, take your time, pulling out of Syria, but what the Americans have been responding with, wanting Turkey to support what it considers and the Americans consider a terrorist organization, is unacceptable to the Turks.
So, Nina, where does this Turkish response leave the Trump administration's policy on pulling out from Syria?
Well, it's really a work in progress. I think we'll see things shift in the next coming days and weeks, Caleb. We've already seen that the U.S. and Turkey have had very tense relations over the past year or so. There was a breakthrough just a few months ago with the release of U.S. pastor Andrew Brunson. And during that time, the U.S. and Turkey at diplomatic level have been shuttling back and forth. And at this point, relations seem to be somewhat back on track. Of course, thrown into chaos again a couple of weeks ago with President Trump's announcement about this troop withdrawal from Syria. And as your guest said very correctly, the best way we have to see of Turkish policy on all of this is that very, very detailed and quite extraordinary op-ed that President Erdogan wrote for the New York Times. You can see that he's appealing directly not just to the administration but the world in outlining Turkish strategy towards this particular issue across the border in Syria. And one thing that struck me, perhaps your guest can weigh in on all of this, is that President Erdogan said, look, we don't have any particular beef with Syrian Kurds. He said a lot of those fighters were young men who have perhaps been constricted under great duress during the fog of war, that they had absolutely no choice but to fight for those militias. He also talked about those militias' use of child soldiers, saying that Turkey was going to make every effort to try and reunite those children with their parents. So this is, I think, a very, very interesting, the op-ed. I'd be interested to hear what your guest thought about this and to see if it would have any kind of reality on the ground from Turkey in the next few weeks.
Well, let's hear from Ali Mustafa on that point.
Absolutely right. As far as Turkey is concerned, this conflating of the YPG PKK, which is a terrorist group as far as Turkey is concerned, with the so-called Kurds, this, conflating these two is a no-go area. There are 14 million Kurds living in Turkey. They're equal citizens as far as Turkey is concerned. So when the Americans come out and say, well, you have to support this militia because they represent all Kurds, this is absolutely incorrect as far as Turkey is concerned. And the Americans as well, because this is a PKK-linked group, Ankara says. We're talking about the YPG. Now, President Trump, a few weeks ago, made all the right noises as far as Turkey and Recep Tayyip Erdogan were concerned. They are willing to come halfway to meet the Americans, but it seems for Ankara, the more they come towards the Americans put on a confused face. On the one hand, Trump says, we're pulling out, the Turks can take care of ISIS and other groups, and on the other hand, now Bolton wants assurances. This is unacceptable.
All right, well, speaking of confusion about the situation in Syria, in announcing the U.S. pullout last month, President Trump did declare, quote, we have defeated ISIS in Syria. But according to reports just this week, ISIS launched a wave of suicide attacks at those U.S. allied Kurdish forces in eastern Syria, killing some 23 of them. ISIS forces also launched a missile on a military position held by Kurdish fighters and allied Western forces near the town of Shafa, killing one fighter of the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces and wounding 2 British soldiers. In response, U.S. warplanes bombed ISIS positions in Shafa. Nina, it certainly doesn't sound like ISIS has been defeated there in Syria.
Not at all. It seems that President Trump's comments are extremely premature. And we have another potential embarrassment coming up for the State Department in just a couple of weeks, Kalev. In early February, they're due to host the annual Coalition Against ISIS Summit, where foreign ministers and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg should be in Washington, as they usually are at that time of year at the State Department as part of that coalition. That's over 70 foreign ministers from around the world. And this has placed the United States in a very awkward position. And that could be why we're seeing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo essentially doing the rounds of several Arab states. He's in Amman, Jordan today. He's in Egypt tomorrow to try and reassure those allies that there is still a great priority for the U.S. against ISIS, and that perhaps the U.S. is not withdrawing from other interests in the region anytime soon. A lot of damage control going on at the region.